China has unveiled a fresh round of fiscal support, boosting the aid package for its economy to $1.4 trillion. This comes shortly after U.S. presidential nominee Donald Trump won the race to the White House and amid risks of more trade tensions between the world's top two economies. More, we're joined by Professor David Daokui Li. He's director of the Academic Center for Chinese Economic Practice and Thinking at Tsinghua University, live from Beijing. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor Li. Now, I need you to explain this to me. Local governments can issue $840 billion in bonds to swap for off-balance sheet debt, this over 3 years. Now, state media in China calling this the biggest debt reduction measure in recent years. How does swapping actually serve to reduce or at least minimize the immediate pressure of debt?
Well, not all details have been released, but I think most likely what the central government will do is to first give each province a quota for each year, and within the quota, the local government will issue debt. The central government will underwrite the debt. In other words, this debt will be on the book of the central government, but the proceedings of the debt will be given to local governments. Local governments will use this debt to pay back their hidden debt. The so-called hidden debt are actually debt issued or occurred by their investment platforms. So that's the way it is. Okay, the amount of this debt is about 5% of GDP over the coming 3 years. That's the amount of debt we are talking about.
So, Professor Li, if we're talking about taking the pressure off local governments, which is presumably what this is about, this would only work if this debt, now underwritten by the central government, would cost less for the local governments to service than debt that before had been hidden. Do we know that for sure?
Yes, we know that for sure. This will come as a big relief for local governments. However, I would like to emphasize that this is not enough. This is not enough. The total amount of local government debt is actually roughly 100% of GDP. We are talking about 5% of GDP in this round of release. Combining this with the previous round, we're only talking about 8% of GDP. So there should be, and there will be, I believe, other rounds of central government debt for this purpose.
Well, arguably, a more radical way to really resolve this issue would be to increase the earnings, the revenue of local governments and decrease their expenditure. Do you see any moves in this direction?
Well, this doesn't work. Increasing the revenue of local governments, reducing their expenditure will amount to a contraction of the Chinese economy. So this doesn't work. The right direction to go, I've been arguing for multiple years, at least 5 years or even longer, is the current policy. That is, the central government should increase its amount of central government debt and using the revenue from the issuance of new debt to swap out local government debt. By the way, let me remind you and also our audience, okay, the total amount of outstanding central government debt is only about 25% of GDP, which is among the lowest in the world. I'm talking about the central government. And in addition, please keep in mind, the central government has a huge amount of assets in their hands. The Chinese government perhaps are the closest to the Singaporean government in this regard. The central government in China holds roughly around 100% of GDP in the amount of their commercially valuable assets. This includes the 6 largest and most profitable commercial banks, 3 very profitable mobile phone operators, and the 2 huge conglomerates, such as the China Merchant Group and the China Resources Group.
Professor Li, leaving aside the fiscal detail, one benefit, or possibly one advantage or coming out of a move like this would be to improve sentiment, to improve domestic demand. So, of course, we've seen the election of Donald Trump. He will be in the White House next year, and there are concerns about 60% tariffs against Chinese imports into the United States. And, of course, think tank, there's the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, coming out to say in order to react to this, China should proactively bolster domestic demand. There's real impetus for that now. And more than that, this must be done timely, in good time, long before these tariffs actually hit China, for them to actually work. So this move, are we actually going to be seeing domestic demand, which has lagged for a period of time now, is that actually going to be picking up?
Yeah, first of all, President Trump's re-election is not a surprise to many people in China. The Chinese policymakers and the general public have been prepared for this re-election. And also, as a consequence, the so-called 60% tariff on Chinese export to the US also will come as no surprise. So as a consequence, the Chinese economy is positioned to do a huge amount of adjustment. There are two areas of adjustments. Number two is to relieve the local governments of their burden of debt. As a consequence of that, local governments will be rejuvenated. They will be able to go on their regular expenditure as they normally should be, because they are at the forefront of providing public service. In addition, as you rightly pointed out, the Chinese urbanization ratio should be quickly boosted in order for domestic consumption to go up. Increasing domestic consumption is actually a win-win policy for everybody, for Chinese general citizens, for those people living in the countryside, and for manufacturers all over the world, and arguably also even actually benefit the US economy, because some of the US exports will come to China having a bigger market.
All right, of course, domestic consumption depends very much on people having confidence in spending, confidence in taking, instead of saving, to spend, confidence in investing in your business because you believe your business will actually prosper. Confidence, something very difficult. Beijing has found it very difficult to return that to its economy since the COVID pandemic. Do you see any moves now actually returning genuine, substantial, sustained confidence to the Chinese consumer to boost domestic consumption? Final question.
Well, three things will be done, or have been, are actually been done. Okay, number one is to boost the share prices, which started from September 24th. The central bank has been doing, and we have seen a very good rebound of the Chinese A share. Number two Chinese government needs to boost the local income, the income of Chinese workers. And this will only come gradually. The very first move is to relieve local governments in their debt. In exchange, as a consequence, the local governments will pay back their delayed payments to many contractors, and this will in turn increase disposable income of many people involved. This is the third thing, very important, is to increase domestic market. As one major measure in this regard is to speed up the urbanization ratio, urbanization process. As a consequence of that, domestic markets will expand, and entrepreneurs will see bigger market, prices will come back, the problem of deflation will be gone, and that will in turn boost investors' confidence. So in summary, stock market, disposable income, and bigger market for the investors.
Thanks, Professor David Daokui Li. He's a former advisor to China's central bank and director of the Academic Center for Chinese Economic Practice and Thinking at Tsinghua University, speaking to us from Beijing. Thank you.